This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview. Joining us today is Darren Hazelwood, the CEO of Panther Metals, for a special feature on the Dotted Lake project. So hello, Darren. Welcome on. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Mark. Thanks for having us on.
It's good to be talking, Darren. It's the first time we've done a special feature with Panther, so I'm looking forward to this. I know we've got some slides to go through. So the Dotted Lake, then, I can see the first slide you have up here. This is obviously showing geographically where the project is. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Mark. I thought I'd just bring people into the project. But just to start off, I think I'll cover that we're talking about Dotted Lake for reasons that will become obvious during this presentation. Abonga, obviously our assays, our cores in for assay, and Manitou Lakes at this stage is very much going through the process, and we're very pleased with where Manitou Lake sits as well as Abonga. But Dotted Lake is the one that's out there at this stage that we can really go into real detail. And there's been developments across our whole portfolio over the last 6 months that leads us into a really exciting stage in the business's development. But look, let's set the scene on Abonga. You can see here, I've given a sort of broad out view of North America. There you can see New York down to the right, then across to Toronto, and it doesn't show on Thunder Bay, but that'll be on the next slide. So effectively, for us to access Dotted Lake, we fly into Toronto, then we fly across to Thunder Bay, and then drive to Dotted Lake. Okay. And if I just move on to the next slide, this gives a closer view, and you can see the Dotted Lake property here on your right hand side. So from Thunder Bay, this is the North Canadian Highway. It's a major trunk road across the north. It effectively links the east and the west of Canada. And it's open pretty much 365 days a year. There's snow plows on it all winter. This route is kept open. Just to give some people an idea, some highlights. Over on the left-hand side, as we look, I move my cursor over there. It's about a 4-hour drive again. It's over to our Manitou Lakes project. You can actually see the outline here of Abonga. But if we talk about Dotted Lake Pacific. So you go along the North Ontario Highway. Actually here, where the Canadian flag is there, that's the Big Bear project being vended into Fulcrum. Okay. And the boys there reckon they'll be listed now, probably in January. Christmas has just got in the way. Then the same thing happened to us when we listed in January of 2020. But that process is well and truly underway. But it's about a 4-hour car journey to Dotted Lake. And you'll notice here Marathon, well, just north of Marathon is Generation Mining's project that's just received government and provincial approval on its environmental license. And they're looking to come into production there circa 2024. Now that is significant. It's said to be the biggest undeveloped palladium deposit in the whole of North America. Well, that development is now underway and they're away. Then you move along the road and you come to the Hemlo. Now Hemlo is obviously one of the most famous mines in the world. It's been produced since the mid 1980s. And immediately after Hemlo is a left-hand turn-in, and this is the road that takes you up to Manitouage, and that actually skirts right on the edge of the Dotted Lake property that you'll see in a further slide as we go through this presentation. And so the access to Dotted Lake is very good. There's a road that runs. Logging road that runs across the edge of Dotted Lake, and that's where we've built our trail into the property from. That's already complete. That was complete for our drill program last autumn. So everything's set up in Dotted Lake, and it's a renowned mining jurisdiction.
Definitely a renowned mining jurisdiction, as you said, and of course it's very clear there about the infrastructure that's in place, the access roads. Just looking there on the outline of the project, is that to scale? Because that's a significant footprint, if so.
It is pretty much to scale.
So it's a very large area.
Yeah, this is taken directly off of Google Earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually showing the outline of our mag survey done.
Okay.
And that was done in 2020. And again, you'll actually see that as we move along. Now, what is really interesting, Mark, here is you can't see this yet, but it will become clear. And this, where I'm moving my cursor to the east of Dotted Lake, that's the Palladium 1 ground. And this is what's now driving genuine interest in the Dotted Lake project.
Mm-hmm.
and what those guys have done. So if I just move on from there.
Yes, please do.
So what you're now seeing, this is taken off of Palladium 1's website, and I hope those guys are quite relaxed about that. It's an impressive sort of new nickel camp, they're calling this. And it runs for about 20 kilometers. And you go from West Pickle Lake, which was announced last week, some more results from there, which were very encouraging. And this moves all the way across to Smoke Lake. And they've had discoveries all the way along here. And from West Pickle Lake, you're looking at southwest direction. That's where Dotted Lake sits. And that,
okay.
You talk to the area of interest on Dotted Lake, you're talking about approximately 9 kilometers. So in geological terms, it is basically neighbors. I think the question here is why are Palladium 1 having success now? It's worth remembering that they won the 2021 North Ontario Discovery of the Year Award for the work that they've done on Tycho. So this isn't just discovery that's being recognised by investors. This is actually something that's been recognised by the wider community and what they've done. But this area is actually totally unmapped by the Canadian Geological Society. And if it's an unmapped area, that in reality sort of puts a dampener on prospectors coming out into the area. And so that's why it's been largely overlooked. It's been assumed that there's basically nothing there. And over the few years for Palladium 1 to now say they've got a 20-kilometer nickel camp is extremely interesting. When you see, as we go through this, where you link that back to Dotted Lake, that actually adds up to an interesting thesis on Dotted. The discoveries have been made in an ultramafic feeder zone, and they're feeder dikes actually, and these have been preserved in the batholith, and that's actually another reason why it makes Dotted very interesting, because the setup we've got it Dotted, and we've got the Dotted batholith just to our south, and the dikes are formed where commodity-rich fluids basically travel along faults in the earth, and that's where they hold, and that's really what Palladium 1 have uncovered, and their continued success, and they've got a really simple exploration model, and that again aligns directly back to Dotted Lake, as we'll uncover. But it's actually a very complex system, and it's taken their time to uncover it. And Neil Pettigrew, who's their exploration manager and he's director of Palladium 1, actually explains it very well on an interview with Crux Investor. It's probably worth people taking their time to go and listen to that interview post watching this, because you'll see the direct correlations to what's going on. And what they've done, they've basically targeted the mag highs. They've then gone onto the ground and they've taken soil samples. And where they've got high high-grade assays from the ground in the soils. They've effectively drilled that target, and they've had almost consistent success in following that program. So looking for anomalous commodities in soils and then drilling. And that's where they've made all these discoveries. And it's genuinely a true nickel camp now.
Well, you've mentioned that about a true nickel camp. I mean, this is sounds very significant that this is a whole new emerging district perhaps going on. And we know what the camps are like over in Canada. They can be pretty significant in size and activity and buzz around what's going on. Why was this area, do you know why it wasn't mapped by the Canadian Geological Survey? Any reason? Obviously, that's the reason why there's been a lack of exploration here.
Look, Canada is a vast area, and I suspect that this is now high on the list of the Canadian Geological Society's program of covering this area.
Okay.
Because sometimes you need a discovery to trigger that process as opposed to the other way around.
The other way around. Okay.
It wasn't because of the batholith there. It wasn't felt that there was really ever going to be anything of any interest. But the fact that the feeder dikes have remained intact, because the batholith comes last. The fact that these feeder dikes remained intact and they're commodity rich will have come as a surprise to just about everybody. But that's what's happened, and that's how it sits there now.
Okay. And in terms of nickel, Darren, nickel exploration in this area, what else are we talking about? With any of the projects, any of the deposits?
Well, you're about 16, 18 kilometers north of Hemlo mine. Which is obviously it's a gold mine.
Yeah.
But this is actually in a completely different geological setting. They're poles apart in what's happened between the two.
Okay.
So this system runs sort of east to west, and that's why Marathon, which is 50 kilometers to the west, is potentially significant there with their palladium discovery. That is coming into production, the mine there for the guys there, and it's just taking a new look at an area, and it's extremely significant.
Okay, so we can clearly see the mag highs there. That's the red area, isn't it, on the map there where they've been drilling. So, I mean, how does this sort of link in then perhaps to Panther's land?
Right. So, as we discussed, we've got the exploration model now well known. What Palladium Mine have done, how they've made these discoveries, and in Panther's terms, in 1983, there was a major soil program conducted on the Dotted Lake area, and its significance has clearly been overlooked. It's only been overlooked in terms of what we now know what Palladium 1 have done. So if I just move on one slide here, Mark, first of all, and just set the scene just very quickly. Here you've got, this is our own, one too many. Here you've got the discoveries by Palladium 1. And then on your left-hand side, you've got Dotted and Lampson. Well, Lampson is actually on our Dotted Lake property. And that's significant. You can, on this, it's a very basic map, but you can actually see the features of the Dotted Lake and of Lampson and how they stand out and how they stand up against what Palladium 1 have done and where they've made their discoveries in terms of the MAG surveys. And what's significant here is the guys at Generation Mining, which is north of Marathon, that discovery was effectively made on the back of the Canadian Geological Society's. They did a huge lake sediment soil sample in the late 1990s. And the two highest grades found in that lake sediment program were actually now on the Generation Mining's area that they're going to mine. that's what led to the discovery that the generation mining are going to bring in production. The third highest sample in that program was actually taken at Lampson Lake. So we're looking at an area that the discoveries weren't known, but nobody knew how this fitted together until Palladium One started doing that, and they've worked it out. Neil is an extremely talented geologist, and the work that he's conducted is a credit to him, but also it's obviously provided us with further information as to what we think is going on at Dotted, where we're at. If I just move on there, Mark, and just give people an indication of what we're looking at Dotted. Now, the area we're going to talk about is roughly where underneath Dotted, where the triangle is. Okay, so this chart here shows the soil anomalies that Palladium One used to then target their drill holes across its entire nickel belt or nickel camp, however you want to discuss it. And it's all parts per million. And you'll see on the left-hand column is the copper. I think there's good numbers, very good numbers there. And you can then see the significance and the quantity of numbers that Panther have got in relation to the other discoveries. You know, it's significant.
So yours there are a lot higher numbers generally.
Generally, yeah. There's one ppm. The highest ppm on this chart is 8 in copper is 891, but we get very, very, very close to that. And then you see the consistency and the high numbers. Now that kind of tells you everything you need to know in terms of us finding this very, very interesting, because it's the broad reach of it. This isn't located in one small area and then we're drilling. This is across quite a broad stretch, which we'll come to again. And again, on the nickel, you can see the nickel numbers are very, very good. We actually, there's the highest nickel showing there, and it's all the way down to the bottom chart. We could have continued all these columns on, by the way, but you have to draw a line at some point. And again, over at cobalt, you can see they've got one real big anomalous cobalt number. We actually exceed that quite substantially, and all the other numbers then exceed. And again, we could have carried on with those cobalt numbers. So this is a broad reach. It's high anomalous copper mineralization in the lake sediments. In the soils, and it can't be anything other than significant in terms of what's now known in this location.
Indeed. Okay, well, let's have a look then at these other slides. This is some more MAG then, is it? MAG surveys.
Yeah, so this is the MAG. This is the area that you looked at, you commented on earlier on. This is the MAG survey. The area on Dotted Lake that we're actually interested in at this moment is where I'm just moving my cursor. And again, I'll break down what's going on in this area in the preceding slides. But you'll also note that, without a doubt, this area is interesting. Also up here, that now becomes very interesting for us. We don't believe there's been any soil program conducted in this location. And also on the left-hand side, just down this area here, because of what we're seeing elsewhere and what we're now learning regarding this nickel camp, this nickel belt.
Okay. And have you drilled anywhere yet, Darren, or are these just soil samples that we can see here, the circles marked?
There's soils and drilling. So we drilled the gold anomaly, but this gold anomaly was separate to this ore body. It's actually not far away, but it's in completely different rocks.
Okay.
And what you're seeing, the dots are either drill holes or they're samples that have previously been taken.
Okay.
Noranda did drill the location where we're looking at in the late 80s or early 90s, but they didn't drill the contact that's creating the most excitement. And again, that will be covered off just shortly. So if I just move on here. Now, this is when things get interesting. They also get a bit more geological. but they also explain the breakdown of what we're seeing and why this is potentially exciting. And the following slide will back that up. What you see in the green, the sweeping across the top here, that's a granite body. So that's all granite. Then the sliver in the middle, that's gabbro. So that's an intrusive rock. That's a rock that's found a fault and it's come through. And we know that these are the locations where deposits are found, right? So it's where the fluids have pushed through a weakness in the earth and hit surface, and that's where that sits. But the body underneath that is almost a frisbee shape. That's where things really do start to get exciting in this location. You can see, and that, right, so that's this body is actually called serpentinite. And so you've got an intrusive against another intrusive. Gabbro, and then you've got serpentinite. Now, you see the star there, which is the AU. That was our drill hole conducted in last autumn. And what it didn't, it was 400-meter hole, but it didn't exceed the limits of the lake, which you can see there. So it didn't intersect the body that we're now looking at.
Okay.
But prior to that drill hole, we had conducted a soil program in this area. And that actually, by default, in reality, did cover this sliver where the serpentinite comes back at surface. There's another reason that the serpentinite in this area is potentially significant. You had in the wider Hemlo area, you've only got one other serpentinite body, ore body that's known, and that is at a place called the Good Child Lake. And exploration continues there to this day. But that's actually a nickel copper PG's target, and it had considerable copper PG nickel anomalies in that area. So that's telling us that this has the potential to be a mineralized body. Now, if we just move on one slide, oops, right, apologies. First of all, what we're looking at here, where these lines are, and you see them running through, that's the contacts. So that's the place where the one rock has met the other. That's where you know is the ultimate weakness. Okay. So that's the area that's your highest probability of a discovery in any geological setting, right? So we're looking at where the serpentinite meets the gabbro. Now, obviously, it would do the same underneath the lake, but we're not worried about that at this stage. And nobody in Ontario worries about a lake being there because most of the mines in Ontario are actually under a lake. So, you know, that's just often not known in the UK. We've got the right rocks, we've got the right contact, we've got the right soil anomalies, and we've got the right geological setting against what Palladium 1 have been doing. Okay, so everything's setting up to look very similar. Yes, yes, but you've got to remember that a lot of this was unknown until Palladium 1 started having the success they've had. Okay. So if what I want people to do is, if you follow my cursor, is just remember that line there. Hopefully people can see that, because that's really is the significance of, we believe, of this area at this time. And that's where you're going to be focusing the next round of exploration, is it? It is. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And it's the only drilling you've done then is where that star is. That was drilling for gold. That was drilling for gold. It was in a different rock formation. Yeah. And it was too far north to intercept the pentonite and that contact with in fact, the gabbro, you can see, is up here. So. And have you planned the next round of exploration? And can you indicate on the map where you're going to be positioning the next round of exploration? Yeah, follow that line. Literally on that line. Okay, yeah, so a mixture of drilling and soil sampling as well, or? Well, I think what you're going to probably find is an IP, a surface IP.
Okay.
and that may well be conducted this winter.
Okay.
We'll be almost certainly putting in drill applications. We've got to do a certain amount of consultation first, naturally, with the local First Nations. Now we achieved the drill permit for the gold showing reasonably quickly and very efficiently. So hopefully we'll be able to repeat that. And we're also a bit more. We have a lot more understanding now in terms of First Nations with our dealings elsewhere, and we're confident we can get those in place. But we'll start that process sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And that will be almost certainly ahead of the IP survey. Just to expedite that process.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so we can look out for some IP coming to give a bit more of an X-ray view, perhaps, of what might be there, all the while getting some permits prepared so that you can drill as soon as possible, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So if we move on to the final slide, what this slide here, and as I said, this slide is showing where the main anomalous grades of nickel, copper were, and the cobalt. And from the contact with the gabbro to the serpentinite, you can actually see for yourselves almost a perfect line all the way through. And then when the serpentinite comes up from underneath the lake, and it comes back onto the surface, where we conducted our own soil program in this location last year and got anomalous grades. You can actually see a 137 ppm nickel. It actually correlates directly. So this, with the work that's been done elsewhere, now makes this an extraordinarily exciting area. Even though that information was out there in public, nobody's been able to kind of piece together the jigsaw and really get an understanding of what's going on and why it's going on there. And that's what we're fortunate in terms of what Palladium One have done. And this now is definitely become of interest to a wider body than just the investment community and Panther Metals. Let's put it that way. It's an obvious geological and exploration target for any company in the world. You can't move away from what's been found and what we've got across such a big area. This is, this is company making stuff. Okay,
well, company making stuff. It is, of course, still early stage, isn't it? We have to say that. You still, it's a, I think, as you said, an emerging nickel camp. So there's not a lot of data to go on, and of course, you're doing the early exploration activities that you can do to find out what is there. And but really, the magic test is, of course, the drilling. Which do you plan to be doing some of that in 2023?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's there's no doubt we've got to refine our targets, and hence looking at doing IP.
Okay.
And once those targets are refined,
getting some high priority targets ready.
Yeah, the obvious next steps are to drill.
And this time it's drilling for nickel rather than gold.
Yeah, and hopefully this has enabled people to understand why we've changed the label. We're not actually a million miles away from where we drilled for gold, but it's into different rocks and a different geological setting. This is purely down to work that we conducted internally and a review of the property, and that was triggered by the success that Palladium One have been having, Mark. There's no doubts about that. But it's quite extraordinary what that review has thrown up. Yeah.
Well, using neurology is always a very good example, I think, in this space, because the best place to find a new mine is in the shadow of a head frame, isn't it? As the famous saying, I think, in Canada goes. And of course, it takes just one company to make that. big discovery to cause a bit of a rush in the area to find extensions of that discovery or even larger deposits. So it's I think a lot of people are aware of that Palladium-1's success. Of course, first-class metals operating in the area as well, and it's good to see that Panther have adapted to that and are going to refine their model, and hopefully you can find some of those extensions of what the deposit that Palladium-1 have found.
Well, I think that's interesting because the way that the feeder dike works, and Palladium-1 have been getting some good results. I think one of the biggest results is, well, they've had 10% up to 10% nickel when they've had over 1% nickel across 16.5 meters. But so these feeder dikes and the mineralization within the feeder dikes, they generally have almost a heartbeat somewhere. And you imagine a vein system around the body, So the hope would be that there is a big deposit that the feeder dikes have been fed from. Is this it? We don't know. Is there potential for it to be it? Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Darren, for showing us those slides there. I think that does spell out quite clearly what the theory of what you think might be there in your exploration plans. So next year, 2023, hopefully is that year of a discovery for Panther metals in the Dotted Lake area for nickel. But thank you very much. Unless there's anything else you'd like to share, Darren?
No, I'm very happy with that. Thank you for the time, and thanks for allowing us to share what we've uncovered on Dotted Lake.
Thank you very much, Darren Hazelwood, the CEO of Panther Metals.
Thanks, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stopboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.